What if the sadness that you've been carrying, the grief that won't lift no matter how much therapy or healing work you do, isn't actually yours? What if it's older than your lifetime? Here's what most healers don't realize. You can do years of personal trauma work and still feel heavy because you're carrying ancestral grief. And ancestral grief requires a completely different approach than personal trauma. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to show you how to tell the difference between personal trauma and ancestral grief, why this distinction changes everything, and what ancestral grief actually needs from you. You've done the work: therapy, EMDR, somatic healing, parts work. You've processed your childhood, your relationships, your wounds, and yet there's still this heaviness, this sadness that feels bottomless, grief that doesn't seem to connect to anything specific in your life. And you're starting to wonder if you'll ever feel light. I'm Dr. Oscar Perez, the soul recovery specialist, and the author of The Flowering War, a book specifically about healing ancestral trauma for natural-born healers. I've worked with over 100 healers carrying lineage grief, and I can tell you, if your sadness feels older than you are, you're not imagining it. You're carrying your lineage's unresolved grief, and it needs to be witnessed differently than personal trauma. I'm going to show you the 5 ways to distinguish ancestral grief from personal trauma and what each type actually needs to heal. Personal trauma has a story, but ancestral grief feels sourceless. Personal trauma has a narrative. This happened to me when I was X years old. You can trace it back to specific events, people, and moments in your life. But ancestral grief feels different. It's a heaviness with no clear origin. You feel profoundly sad, angry, or afraid, but you can't point to why. This is because the grief doesn't originate in your lifetime. It was passed down through your lineage. Here's what nobody tells you. Not all of your pain is yours. Almost every healer I work with describes grief that feels too big for their personal history. They'll say, my childhood wasn't that bad. My life is actually pretty good. So why do I feel this heavy? That is ancestral grief. It's grief that predates your birth, but still lives in your body. Imagine inheriting an old house. You didn't build it, but you live in it. Sometimes you feel the sadness in certain rooms, not because something happened to you there, but because something happened in that space before you arrived. The sadness is real. It's in the structure, but it's not your story. That is ancestral grief. Real pain in your body from experiences that aren't yours. Do you feel profound sadness, anger, or fear that doesn't connect to anything specific in your life? Does the grief feel older or bigger than what you've personally experienced? That's likely ancestral. But there's another way to tell the difference. See, personal trauma responds to processing. Ancestral grief, it needs acknowledgement. Personal trauma can heal through processing, through talking it out, through EMDR, through somatic release. When you process personal trauma, you feel lighter, resolved, integrated. Ancestral grief doesn't respond in the same way. You can process it endlessly without resolution. That's because ancestral grief doesn't need processing. It needs acknowledgement and witnessing. It needs you to say, this happened in my lineage. I see it and allow myself to feel it so that it can be released. You can't think your way out of ancestral grief. You have to witness it and process it somatically and ritualistically. Healers tell me constantly, I've done so much work on my sadness and it's still there. They've processed childhood wounds, relationship pain, every personal source of grief, and the heaviness remains. That's because they're trying to process ancestral grief like personal trauma. And it doesn't work that way. Personal trauma is like a wound on your body. You clean it, bandage it, let it heal. Ancestral grief, it's like carrying someone else's ashes. You can't heal ashes. You can only acknowledge them, honor them, and find a place to lay them down. Processing tries to heal, but ancestral grief, it needs ritual, not therapy. If you've processed your personal trauma thoroughly and still feel heavy, stop trying to fix the grief. Start asking, whose grief am I carrying? And now, here's where it gets even more specific. Ancestral grief, it shows up in patterns, not just in feelings. Personal trauma creates symptoms, flashbacks, triggers, specific fears, but ancestral grief, it creates patterns. Repeated family dynamics, compulsive behaviors, inherited beliefs. You might notice, my grandmother did this, my mother did this, now I'm doing this. Patterns like compulsive caretaking, inability to rest, fear of scarcity, hypervigilance. These aren't just learned behaviors. They're survival strategies passed down through the generations. Ancestral grief doesn't just make you sad. It makes you repeat what your lineage survived. When I work with healers on lineage patterns, they often realize that this compulsion to help everyone, to never rest, to be hypervigilant, well, my grandmother or grandfather was like this. My mother or my father was like this. The pattern runs in families because it was once a survival strategy rooted in fear, anger, or other aspects of unmetabolized grief. Now it's this ancestral grief keeping the pattern alive. Your lineage is like a river that's been flowing in one direction for generations. The current or the pattern is strong. Even if the original reason for the current no longer exists, like the war is over, the famine ended, the displacement stopped, well, the river still flows that way. You're swimming in water that was shaped by your ancestors' struggles for survival. So ask yourself, do I repeat patterns that I saw in my parents or grandparents? Do I carry fears or compulsions that don't match my actual life circumstances? When I look at my family history, do I see the same struggles repeated across generations? If the answer is yes to all three, you're carrying ancestral patterns, not just personal wounds. So how do you actually work with ancestral grief? Here's what changes. If this is resonating, if you're recognizing ancestral grief in yourself, subscribe for more on lineage healing for natural born healers. Soul recovery consultation is in the description. Ancestral grief carries historical context, often related to collective trauma. Ancestral grief is often tied to historical events, to war, displacement, colonization, genocide, famine, slavery. Your lineage survived something catastrophic, and the grief from that, it still lives in you. You might not know the details, but your body remembers. It's in your bones. This is especially true for those born with the unique capacity to become healers. Many come from lineages where being sensitive or empathic was dangerous. The grief that you carry might be, well, we had to hide who we were. We had to leave our homeland. We lost our language, our rituals, our people. Your body remembers what your lineage had to survive, even if no one told you the story. Every healer I work with who explores their lineage discovers that there's displacement, violence, loss, marginalization. Their ancestors survived by being useful, by hiding their gifts, by never resting. The grief they carry isn't just personal sadness, it's lineage-level loss of belonging and of home. Imagine that your great-grandmother fled a war. She survived, but she lost her home, her community, her sense of belonging, her rituals, her beliefs. She never spoke about it. She just kept moving, kept surviving. That grief, it didn't disappear. It entered her body, her nervous system, her way of being, and it passed to your grandmother and to your mother and to you. You're carrying grief for a home that you never knew and belonging to a lineage that you lost generations ago. Research your family history. Look for patterns of migration, war, displacement, cultural loss, persecution, marginalization. If you find it, you're more than likely carrying ancestral grief. Now, here's what ancestral grief actually needs from you. You can't fix ancestral grief. It's not yours to fix. Your job isn't to resolve it. Your job is to witness it, acknowledge it, and ritualistically release the emotions that are attached to it. Ancestral grief heals through ritual, through speaking to your ancestors, through acknowledging their pain, through honoring their survival and their ways of being. This breaks the pattern of silent suffering. You're the first to say, I see what happened, I honor it, and I'm laying it down. This is what ends the transmission of grief to the next generation. You're not here to fix your lineage's pain. You're here to be the one who finally acknowledges it and tends to it consciously. The healers who successfully release ancestral grief don't do it through more therapy. They do it through ritual, through speaking to their ancestors, through acknowledging what happened, through creating ceremonies of release. When the grief is finally witnessed, it stops needing to be carried. You need to stop trying to process ancestral grief like personal trauma. You need to stop feeling responsible for fixing generations of pain. You need to stop carrying the grief silently because no one else is talking about it. And you also need to stop glorifying it, which a lot of people nowadays do. You have to start speaking directly to your ancestors, either out loud or written. You have to acknowledge what they survived and what was lost. And you have to create simple rituals that honor their pain and release it through your body. Here's a specific practice that can begin this ancestral healing. Ancestral grief requires ritual acknowledgement. It requires a practice that honors your lineage and what your lineage carried and gives you permission to witness it and lay it down. This isn't about forgetting or dishonoring your ancestors. It's about being the one in your lineage who finally witnesses the pain and releases it so it doesn't pass to the next generation. And this works because ritual creates sacred space for grief to be seen in ways that your ancestors would have done it. Speaking aloud breaks the silence that keeps the grief alive, and the acknowledgement allows what's been held to finally be released. You actually honor your ancestors by releasing their pain, by not carrying it forever. Imagine your ancestors have been carrying a heavy stone up a mountain for generations. Each generation carries it further, believing that they must. But you are the first to stop and ask, why are we carrying this? And when you realize it's the grief from something that happened long ago, you can finally set it down. Not because you're dishonoring them, but because the journey is complete. You witnessed it. You honored it. And now you can release it. So try this simple ritual to start this process. Find a quiet space outside if possible. Light a candle or build a small fire if it's safe. Make an offering of gratitude to the earth or to the fire. This can be copal, sage, cornmeal, tobacco, or even water. As you learn more about your ancestors, you can adjust this offering to fit their ancestral ways. Get a bowl of water and place it next to you. Place one hand on your heart and say out loud, I speak to my ancestors. Acknowledge what you know. Say, you survived war, displacement, loss, violence. You carried grief so that I could be here. I honor your pain. I honor your survival. Allow your words to flow. Don't limit them or try to guide them. Let whatever comes up move through you and allow it to express itself openly and clearly. This may take time, and you'll repeat this ritual many times, ideally. So don't worry about it if you feel shy or silly at first. Just gently push through it. Take all the time that you need. Don't limit yourself. Allow any emotions to flow through you as well. And when you feel complete, say out loud, I am the one in our lineage who witnesses the grief. I acknowledge it, I honor it, I release it from my body. This fear for survival is no longer necessary. The pattern ends with me. Place your hands on the earth and say, I give this grief back to the earth. It is too heavy for one body to carry. Sit and wait for the fire to go out on its own, or extinguish the flame of the candle by wetting your fingertips and putting it out. Don't blow it out. Take a bowl of water and find a tree to offer the water to. Then sit in silence for 5 to 10 minutes and notice what shifts in your body. This breaks the silence that keeps ancestral grief alive. It honors your ancestors by witnessing their pain. It gives your body permission to release what isn't yours, and it begins the process of energetic completion. The grief has been seen, acknowledged, released. It ends the transmission pattern so that future generations don't inherit it. Repeat this ritual whenever you feel that ancestral grief rising up again. Each time you acknowledge it, you lighten the load. The grief that you carry isn't all yours. Some of it belongs to your lineage, your ancestors who survived what should have broken them. You honor them not by carrying their pain forever, but by being the one who finally witnesses it, acknowledges it, and lays it down. You can be the pattern breaker. You can be the one who says, it ends here. Rituals like this can be integrated into your life to help process unmetabolized ancestral grief. But this is only a beginning. Over time, you can learn more elaborate and powerful rituals to help you and your loved ones release the unmetabolized ancestral grief that causes painful family patterns once and for all. Subscribe for more on ancestral healing and soul recovery for natural-born healers. And if you're ready for deeper support in releasing lineage grief, check the link in the description for a soul recovery consultation. You don't have to carry this alone.